up, people? It's Timmy Joe. Sick, got a head cold, trying to make videos about computers on the internet, and you know how it is in these times of the COVID. Sick, it's never fun, it's always worrisome, but it's all congestion in my head from my kid going back to school, and he had a runny nose for a day. I've been dealing with this for like 3-4 days, so you know how it is. So I want to do a video for you here because I want to return the CPU to a very kind viewer. See here, got a nice engineering sample, an AMD Zen Plus chip here, and it's 8 core 16 threads, and No Blanks on Twitter sent me an image of it, and I said, dude, I want to do a video on that, and he was like, sure, it's got bent pins anyways, you could fix it for me, and so I did, and the pins weren't that bad. Took a pin in like 5 minutes of my work, got it plopped in here, and it turns out it's a 2700X engineering sample, and there was no drama whatsoever. I've dealt with lots of Intel engineering samples, never AMD, and usually you have to find some special BIOS, make sure your motherboard wasn't made before a certain time, or it's a certain chipset or whatever. And with those, they need like an old BIOS revision or a custom BIOS revision to run these engineering samples and overclock them, because typically they have really low frequencies. And it's usually a mess. I've done videos on them before, things get disabled in the BIOS. It's just, you don't get the latest security updates from having the latest BIOS. This thing works perfectly on whatever BIOS I had on this Arsenal Gaming Tomahawk Max motherboard. Plugged it in after I straightened the CPU pins, and she works perfectly. And I am happy to report there's no drama whatsoever. It actually makes for kind of a boring video here because it's just a 2700X, but the real thing is the price. So you want to get into an 8 core 16 threaded CPU on kind of the budget, because you're looking to maybe house one of these, the 3080 just launched. There's going to be a ripple effect of graphics cards, higher end graphics cards that are going to be way cheaper now. Hopefully that'll happen soon. And guys like this here 1080 Ti, all of a sudden are going to, be kind of cheap video cards to pick up. And you don't really want to pair those with like 4 core 8 threaded CPUs. You could, but you need like something high end from Intel, and those are expensive anyways. You could go 2600 or 1600 or something like that on the Ryzen side, sure, but 8 core 16 thread, that's good sweet spot, and they're like available. But if you want to go Intel, what are you doing? 9900K, it's never going to happen for cheap anyways. Any of the high-end desktop stuff, the X299 stuff, that's completely out of the question. X99 is still out of the question. And then we start getting at Haswell. Well, these are kind of cheap. Here's a 5 or 6 year old CPU, an E5 1680 V2. Got to find yourself a nice X79 motherboard for these two, which are very hard to come by. You could go with one of those cheap ones on AliExpress too, but that's a whole other beast. And these are still $200. $250. There's one for $170 here, sure, but the motherboards are going to be stupid expensive. And then if you want to go on Newegg here and actually buy a Ryzen 2700X, like the one that's in this system, it's still over $200, $220. Even the 2700 is more money because they probably aren't making them anymore, and they have 1700s on there, but you're only saving $20. And in my opinion, the 1700 is not the best way to go. It's the really bad memory compatibility and speed issues on Zen 1 on the very first gen of Ryzen, and going Zen 2, there's like a whole, it's faster out of the gate, it's got higher boost speeds and better, it'll manage those boost speeds all on its own if you're not overclocking much better, and it's just a better way to go. And I got the memory in this thing running at 3400 megahertz. You'd never do that with a 1700, so keep that in mind. So if you want to do, go on eBay and try and find one of these things cheap, a 2700 or 2700X, you're not really going to. They're pretty much near retail. Maybe you could pick one up on Craigslist. Maybe you could, find one used locally. Definitely explore that option. If you have a decent, selling in your town, a decent used market, definitely go that way. But eBay's not really going to help. So where are you going to turn to? Well, AliExpress engineering sample. And I got to tell you, it's right here, plopped it in. It just worked after I bent the pins back, and I was pretty impressed. And we're at $168, $170 basically USD with $1 shipping there. And you've got to wait for it to come from China, and there's some risks associated with that. But I've had very good luck with AliExpress. If something doesn't show up, I get my money back. And if something doesn't work when it shows up, I get my money back. So there's always to think about that. There is some way for you to get your money back if this doesn't work, where if you go and buy something used on Craigslist, you're probably not getting your money back. So you can think about that. So $170, that sounds pretty good, but I'd wager that that's not even the best deal. If you want to go $2,700, they have them for $140 shipped on AliExpress. That's the real deal here. I would avoid the engineering sample, although it's a 2700X, so it's going to boost higher, and it might have a little bit better silicon, might overclock a little bit better, but 2700X and it's a real Ryzen processor, that's probably your way to go. Plus, you're going to save $30. That's not a bad deal at all. And then, you go over and, there's lots of options on AliExpress for low-priced Ryzen, so it's definitely worth checking out. But you want to go motherboard for one of these things, you sort by lowest price, B450. I'd go with the ASRock B450M Pro 4 here. Generally a pretty decent motherboard, and you can't overclock with this motherboard for $82. So you go with one of those 2700s in this for like $210. Then you go grab, $60 worth of DDR4. All of a sudden you got a really decent budget gaming PC with 8-core, 16 threads. That 3200 megahertz memory is really cheap right now, and that would pair real nicely with this. So it's pretty cool. Try and find an X79 motherboard, anything like that. Just, for these kinds of prices, this is never going to happen. So it's pretty cool. So you want to see what kind of performance we're getting with this thing? Well, 174 single-threaded CPU score in Cinebench R15. And I've overclocked this thing to 4.2 gigahertz all-core. I think 1.375 volts. It's not bad at all. And we're getting up there. That's 360 mil AIO liquid cooler in here, but we're up near 80 degrees, but it's handling it just fine. And yeah, 4.2 gigahertz memory, 3400 megahertz CL18. Well, I put the memory down a little bit, and we're at 1808. I've even seen higher on here if you want to check out. I got 1822 last time. That's really good performance. A 1700 or 1800X at best might do like 1750. This is, definitely a lot better performance, and like I say, better memory compatibility. There's a lot of times with the first gen Ryzen, you can't even get memory kits to work. I know that's gotten better and depends on what BIOS you have and stuff like that, but I generally think Zen Plus is the better way to go. So I gotta say, this is just a really good CPU, a really good value, and with this kind of performance and this kind of overclockability, you can't go wrong for the price that these things are at. It's ridiculous that you're able to get, the engineering sample aside, a 2700X, an 8-core, 16-threaded CPU that'll go to 4.2 gigahertz-ish, and net you fairly decent gaming performance. With this 1080 Ti and in Fortnite, I was able to do 1440p, 144 hertz, pretty much at the highest setting. So that's really decent. I wanted to see how it compared to the 3700X I did have in this system, and it's noticeable, but it's definitely not night and day. That's for sure. Zen 2 is definitely faster, but it's definitely not night and day compared to this. So really, really good stuff. So $140, $80 motherboard, $60 worth of RAM. You got yourself a really good deal on 8-core, 16 threads, getting you ready for when all these GPUs, these 1080 Ti's, these 2070s, they start trickling down the line and becoming real cheap. You might be able to get yourself like a really kick-ass gaming PC for like $500-600, where like a year ago that same PC was costing you $1,000. It's not bad. It's really not bad. So I just wanted to throw up this engineering sample thing. It's a good value. It's not as good a value as the 2700, but I was so surprised that there was no drama. There was no issues getting it running. It literally just booted up like a normal 2700, and the only difference is that it has that AMD engineering sample on there, and I'm a little disappointed that there wasn't some drama, but at the same time, it's much better that there wasn't, so that you can just drag these things, put them in to the motherboard, get them going, and wanted to do a little review on an engineering sample. I haven't seen many on YouTube. So I'm at Watch Timmy Joe, Instagram and Twitter. I've got to go maybe get a drink of water, a little hoarse in the throat. I hope I get better for next week and we can start pumping videos out a little bit more. I know I've missed this whole 3080 business, but I should have a 3070 launch card. I should. So I'm looking forward to that. Fingers crossed. And, you know, there's lots of stuff coming up. Zen 3, big Navi, lots of stuff. Hope my COVID goes away. I don't have COVID. And I will see you guys in another video. Thank you very much for watching. Beware of AliExpress, but, I mean, you can't argue with those prices. And I've actually had pretty good success with them in the past. So don't worry too much about ordering from there. But at the same time, your mileage may vary. So, you know, I'll leave links in the description. Stuff like that. So thanks very much for watching. Keep her sleazy. Be safe out there.